afternoon. Just a reminder that meeting will be live streamed and the recording of it will be placed on the Council's website. Item 1 on today's agenda is apologies for absence.
Yes, thank you, Chair. We have apologies today from Councillor Cooper, who's substituted by Councillor Fennell, and Councillor Ridgway has also sent her apologies.
Thank you. Are there any other? I think we're all here now. Item 2, declarations of interest. Members are requested to declare the existence and nature of any disposable pecuniary interest and/or other interest not already on their register of interests in any item on the agenda and withdraw from the meeting at the appropriate time. Have we received any declarations in advance?
None received, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any members wishing to declare this afternoon? No, thank you. Item 3, minutes of the last meeting. We have now the minutes of our meeting held on Tuesday, the 19th of October. Are we happy that these are our correct record? Thank you. We do have, before I should have jumped the gun a bit there, just a few words from Adrian regarding the 106 monies that were raised at our last meeting.
Thank you, Chair. Just in relation to the details on page 9 of the papers, members will recall discussion about Section 106 agreements back in October and questions in particular from Councillors Foster and Liggett. And just further to those, Chair, I've written to Councillor Liggett specifically in relation to the wool pack that she raised with officers, and as we discussed with committee last time, Chair, the issues that Councillor Foster discussed with us, and we will bring that in the update that will come back to members in a couple of months' time as agreed. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Are we all happy with those? Thank you. If I take it was Councillor Elliott moved them, and second by Councillor Armitage. All those in favour, can I have a show of hands, please? Thank you. Those against? Any abstentions? None. The motion was carried. The main business of this afternoon, we have 2 applications to consider as well as the appeals report. As you can see, each of the items has its own report, and I am happy with this and intend to consider this as the business in order. Before we do, I would like the clerk to explain for the benefit of members, speakers, and those watching on YouTube how we will deal with these applications.
Thank you, Chair. This is the procedure for considering applications at the meeting. We will consider the 2 applications in the order they are set out on the agenda. The Chair will introduce the application, then ask the planning officers to refer members to any late comments or updates received since the agenda was issued. The late items agenda supplement has been published on the Council's website and hard copies have been circulated to you. The planning officers will then give a brief presentation setting out the application plans and photographs from the site. After this, the Chair will ask each of the speakers, objectors, then the applicant or their agent to speak to the committee. Each speaker will have 3 minutes to put forward their views. There will be a reminder given by the clerk when 30 seconds remain. At the end of the speaker's 3 minutes, members of the committee will have an opportunity to ask the speaker questions, if necessary, to clarify any points they have made. When we have heard from all of the speakers on an application, the Chair will open up the meeting for debate by the committee and determination by a vote. The votes will be taken by roll call. A note for the speakers. Once the application you have come to speak on has been dealt with, you may leave the chamber or the Zoom platform. If you choose to remain, then please note you will not be allowed to participate further in the meeting from that point. As you're aware, this meeting is being live streamed and a recording will be placed on the Council's website. Please note that others may choose to copy this recording from the internet. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. The first application, which is for Holmwood, which is NED/2100853/FL. In line with our normal practice, I'm going to ask the planning manager and officers to tell us about any late comment reports that have been produced and to give a brief presentation showing any photos and plans of the site. I will allow the officers to complete their presentation. Consequently, members should please reserve any points of order or questions about the process until the end. There'll be plenty of time for questions later. Adrian, are you taking this or is it Graham?
It'll be myself.
Thank you, Graham.
Can somebody just enable screen sharing so I can share the presentation?
So you're putting surface water
based
into
on
sewer?
what the calculations we've got at the moment. We have an exploration as part of the technical design whether there is any potential for soak-away testing in terms of the fact that whether or not the water, any surface water, can run off into the existing kind of ground conditions again at a sort of slower rate. At the moment, the preliminary investigations suggesting that's not necessarily possible based on the kind of the existing ground conditions, but it is yet to be fully determined. And as you may be aware, there are a number of different kind of steps that are taken in order to try and maximise the application of, say, the systems to avoid kind of connections into public sewers wherever possible. However, ultimately, if there is no other solution available, then that becomes an option that is available. But it has to have gone through a sequential test to ensure that those other options have been applied prior to simply just making a connection. So that is still to be determined, subject to the detailed kind of design that would kind of subsequently follow on post-approval.
So you're expecting us to make a decision when you haven't really come up with a satisfactory answer? Would I be right?
I don't think that's necessarily the case. This has been through the local lead flood authority, and we had a kind of dialogue backwards and forwards with regard to the kind of proposals that have been put forward. There have been a number of adaptations that have been made by the drainage engineer in order to respond to the concerns. They have come back with a number of conditions that are to be applied to any approval, which are then acting as, I say, the safeguard in terms of ensuring that the design is suitable and appropriate for the location in question. So I think in terms of whilst there are elements that are still to be defined and determined, as there are with the external building design, as there are with any application that is being approved or determined up and down the country, there are certain elements that still need to be looked at kind of post-approval, and hence the discussions with the statutory consultees have produced no objections in principle to the scheme. However, where there are elements that still need to be worked upon or developed, they have applied appropriate conditions to safeguard that work and give the opportunity for the council to reject or amend or approve at a later date. I think that's a fair and reasonable approach.
Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Armitage, you've had quite a stab at this. If we move on to Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, Mr. Woods. My question is around the 106 monies. When we look in our pike on page 38, 8.3, it states financial contributions were requested in relation to the education. So DCC of 188,000, and we've also got play space enhancements along with the maintenance contribution. So we're upwards of 200,000. However, it was concluded that the scheme was unviable, which is understandable when you're asking for that sort of money. And so what you're looking for is permission for these for a 100% scheme of affordable housing, but giving no 106 monies. So my concern, I just welcome your comments around this. You've concluded, I'm guessing it's not just our officers, but I'm guessing agents and builders have concluded that the 188,000 would not be financially viable. That I understand, but it's a kind of all or nothing. Now, it's understandable that you wish to build these properties and give no 106 monies. That is understandable from a developer's point of view. I've got no difficulty with that. However, there's got to be, I think, there must be some there. There must be some space in the middle. It's obvious you can't give 188,000 on that many properties when they're all affordable. So it's kind of a on or off there. I just wonder if you've got any comments at all with regards to what would be viable, yet still giving 106 monies.
I think what one of the kind of points that have been made and we've discussed with officers during the determination period is obviously if we're looking at this from a private developer point of view, and the fact that you're looking at somebody that is going to be generating units that are going to be built for profit and sale, and therefore generating, should we say, a financial return out of the development site, then as architects, designers, we are fully in support of this Section 106 scheme in terms of being able to kind of give back to the community in which the kind of development would be effectively benefiting from. In this instance, we are doing an entirely affordable scheme here, which basically means that the scheme inherently is not being built for profit, it's being built for the benefit of the local community and essentially giving something back. So by virtue of the fact of its designation as affordable housing, in essence, it is in line with the principles of the Section 106 funding in terms of what that's trying to do. What we are doing at the moment, I'm not party to the full kind of financial viability details associated with the application. simply an architect and draw pictures is generally how I kind of simplify my job title. It is something where, as a construction of these units, it is going to be financially kind of in the balance in terms of kind of, it's not something that is going to be generating a profit. EMH own the site. It is an asset they already have in their kind of effectively their portfolio. It makes sense for them to be able to kind of generate the affordable housing, the product they deliver and build up and down the kind of the East Midlands, based on the fact that they already own the site. What it doesn't mean is the fact that they are going to be making any significant kind of funds out of this. Say, ultimately, it is an affordable housing scheme that will be providing much needed affordable housing for people in the local community. And that's what's at the forefront of the development, not about making money and not about making profit. Equally, when you balance it with this, there is not necessarily any sums of money that then can be kind of given to other causes in order to kind of facilitate kind of development elsewhere. This is kind of on the margins, and that's essentially what the viability assessment has sort of deduced and has been agreed through with North East Derbyshire District Council as well.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Liggett.
Good afternoon. I think a lot of my questions have actually been asked, the same as Councillor Foster and Councillor Armitage, but this attenuation water, is that being slowly released into the 150 mil sewer that's running under the houses? No,
this would all be subject, this would all be basically into, so the foul water, the 150 mil sewer that is existing on site and runs underneath the proposed building is a foul water sewer, so we wouldn't be connecting into that. Essentially, any new drainage infrastructure that goes in with the site would basically be formed out of kind of new drainage connections, etc., prior to connecting into the main sewers, or effectively just off site. So yeah, there would be no, at the moment, there's not necessarily any intentions to be sort of forging kind of major connection to existing kind of undersized pipes, etc. It's all subject to a detailed modelling analysis, sort of prior to then forging connections into existing sewers elsewhere.
Thank you. And also regarding going backwards quite a way, but regarding the house that's standing at the moment, would it not be possible, or on about, bringing it up to modern standards, would it not be possible to have the external cladding, which is being put on an awful lot of properties at the moment?
In essence, yes. I can't argue that you couldn't necessarily do that. However, I think all of the arguments have been made about the argument for retention of Ellen House is the fact that it's beautiful on the outside, or the comments have been made that it's beautiful on the outside. If you're then looking at applying a modern sort of insulated render system on the outside, then inherently you are then destroying what was the original feature that people are kind of wishing to sort of seek and retain. It's still equally not going to go back to my previous comments. There are measures that could be placed on to Ellen House in order to improve the thermal efficiency, and that would improve the building, but it still wouldn't be up to the standards that we'd be able to generate out of a kind of a new build construction. And equally, it would be commercially and financially far more unviable to do so.
Do you intend reusing the bricks of that house, or are we crushing those up and bringing new bricks in?
At this stage, again, that decision has not necessarily been kind of confirmed, but they would be, but by virtue of the age, there will be imperial bricks as opposed to metric bricks. Therefore, they wouldn't necessarily coordinate with the same kind of building kind of standards that we're working on or assuming for the new modern build development. What we've often done on sites where we've had existing structures on site is the fact that when the building is being demolished, instead of materials being kind of taken off site, they are crushed on site and potentially can be offered up for creating the kind of hardcore and sub bases. So essentially, you're having a lower carbon footprint as a result of that kind of demolition process and keeping material on site, as opposed to demolishing, exporting from site and then importing fresh material on site to form sub bases, etc. So I think in the climate in which we're working at the moment, that is something that could be kind of considered.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions? Councillor Hartsell.
Okay, well, I'm interested that you're doing this for the benefit of the community and you're not making any profit, so you can't pay a 106. So I think you're the first contractor or builder that I've come across that's not making profit out of some development. So I congratulate you for that. My question really relates to traffic and parking. You did say you provided adequate parking arrangements for the residents and for visitors. But could you explain how that will work on the site?
Yeah, I mean, essentially we have a level of parking that is providing sort of 200% parking for all of the houses, which is a sort of a minimum of 2 spaces per dwelling. With the apartments, there are 1 space per apartment with 2 for one of the 2-bed apartments, and then we have visitor space for the apartments and a couple of visitor spaces on the Tibshelf Road access as well. I think there's adequate space within the site to accommodate the vehicle movements that we're likely to anticipate. And in terms of going back to the point about highway safety or transport safety, one of the things to bear in mind is the existing use that is on site at the moment, albeit say a redundant entity, but the permission that's in place for office accommodation and the former kind of public house uses would be able to cater for or generate a much higher number of vehicles using that Heath Road point of access than would currently be generated by or would be generated by the proposed development. So therefore, the number of vehicle movements at the Heath Road access would actually be kind of minimised over the lifetime of the development, and hopefully would be spread out over the course of a working day, as opposed to being a more focused kind of access and egress point at kind of rush hour periods or at kind of localised points throughout the day.
You said 1 parking spot for 1-bedroom apartments and 2 slots for 2-bedroom apartments?
Yeah.
I'm not sure how many 2-bedroom apartments there are under development.
There's only 1.
Just 1. And
yes.
2 visitor slots, did you say?
1 visitor slot.
There's 1 parking for visitors?
In the apartment block and 2 on the Tibshelf Road access.
Right. And would each of these slots be allocated to specific apartments?
Yes.
I think you're going to have a problem then. I don't think there's enough parking.
That's a point of opinion based on the design has been designed in accordance with the Derbyshire Highway Standards. It's been sent out twice as part of the application process, once on the initial scheme when we had 20 units, and then once again when the scheme has been reduced down to 19 units. There's been no adverse comments in relation to the parking provision that's been met.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? Councillor Jones?
Yeah, just looking at what we have, a diagram of the actual site. What are these? I can't read them because they're so small. But on the right-hand side on Heath Road, there's like quite a space with an outline of a building in it, but that comes outside of the red line. I think very difficult to tell. Do you know anything about that piece of land there? What is that building? It's off Heath Road. Is that the property? I can't read it because it's little tiny writing. Yeah.
I believe you might be referring to number 77 Heath Road.
Is that 77 Heath Road, right?
I think so.
Yeah. I mean, there's all that parking at the moment, that big expanse of concrete, well, or whatever it is. A lot of these will go on to that, won't they? The new apartments will go into that area where the concrete is. So
I think a huge amount of the site in terms of the external kind of ground is made up of hard standing, which is currently just a kind of a sea of tarmac, which obviously facilitated the car parking facilities for the former use as offices and both as a public house as well. Consequently, that doesn't have a huge benefit to the site in terms of any kind of surface water drainage and runoff, on the basis it's a kind of an impermeable layer. Hopefully what can be seen as a result of the proposals put forward is that there is a huge amount of more green space associated to this development, and therefore creates a much larger volume of impermeable area as opposed to impermeable area, and hence could be of benefit to the kind of the natural drainage of the site anyway.
And I was just trying to understand it as well. So the actual house that would come down is mainly parking areas on this, isn't it?
Yeah, and also partially occupied by plot 7.
Yeah. Thank you.
Councillor Elliott?
Yeah, Mr. Woods, is anyone ever able to buy these houses outright, or do they just maintain a 40% stake?
It would by definition of the fact it's an affordable housing scheme, it is effectively would need to remain that in perpetuity. So whilst I think Jane mentioned about the fact that people can buy on the shared ownership properties, can buy a stake in that property, they will never be able to, and they might be able to increase that stake proportionally over their lifetime in order to kind of increase their, should we say, level of ownership. There will never be an ability for anybody to sort of purchase these outright and therefore essentially become a market sale property in the future. That's what's kind of the shared ownership sort of scheme does. It kind of limits and prevents that. And they can essentially kind of sort of maintain those, as I say, affordable houses right the way through.
You see, I get that, what you're saying about the shared ownership properties, but for me, an affordable house is something someone can buy, own, and probably want to stay in for the rest of their lives, but own outright. That for me is buying an affordable house.
Okay, I might have to defer back to Jane on that, if that's okay. So
you see what I disagree with, and it might be ticking boxes and getting around being able to call it affordable housing. But for me, affordable housing, and maybe this is just my take on it, is a house that you can buy over a certain amount of time, just like you get a mortgage for a house, but eventually it's yours, not just 40% ownership, because at some point, or if they ever decided to sell them, who decrees how much the extra 60% is worth at some point, and does that then become not affordable, if you know what I'm saying? Because I'm still stuck with the Section 106, where, you know, I read in the report is there because it's again, it says about as we've heard from the objectors, it says about the contribution towards education, health and place space, and as such, the officers in agreement with the planning manager consider it should be determined by us, by the members and the planning committee in line with our constitution. So I don't want this to be a complete and utter stumbling block, because in my mind, so far, they can neither afford them outright, never buy them outright, and you guys don't want to put anything in towards the local community. That's how I see it. Might be quite a narrow view of it, but that's how I see it.
I'm being told that there is the flexibility that the kind of the share, or the ownerships of the shares can be kind of staircased upwards to a maximum of 100%. So ultimately, then that would kind of reach that kind of goal that you're talking about. However, it is subject, in terms of the kind of the cost of those stakes, it's all subject to RICS valuations in order to kind of assess the affordability and the price that is governed by those particular shares, etc. I'm going to have to essentially probably stop there, because it is going beyond my level of kind of knowledge. And I think if we want to kind of have a kind of more detailed discussion, it's either something that would probably need to be dealt with by the applicant themselves, or it's a kind of a subsequent discussion, I think.
I understand that. Thanks very much for your help on it anyway.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions before we move on? No, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, the next part is officers to questions, and no doubt there'll be quite a few of those. I'll start the list now. Are there any questions for officers? Councillor Hall, Councillor Hancock?
Yeah. Oh. We're going to get the video.
Councillor Armitage.
Are we going to get the video up of the officers first?
Yeah, as soon as they start to respond, their face will be on your screen.
Okay, right. Thank you. I just wanted to know, what weight do we have to put on the Ellen? Well, the old pub Ellen House as it is at the moment. Is there much weight we have to put on that regarding this planning application, please?
Just come back on that first, Chair, and then Graham will add anything he thinks appropriate. I'm sure the weight to be attached to any element, Chair, is a matter for the decision maker, and that's the planning committee in this instance. In terms of heritage and non-heritage assets, non-designated heritage assets. Heritage assets are those that are listed or conservation areas, so they are designated nationally, and in this instance, neither of those apply to this application. In terms of non-designated heritage assets, The council itself doesn't have a local list of those properties. However, we rely on the historic environment record, which is referred to in the NPPF. And if a structure or building or other feature is identified on that list, the historic environment record, then we classify that in our consideration as a non-designated heritage asset. In this instance, Chair, Elland House isn't a non-designated heritage asset by that definition. And therefore, Chair, from an officer point of view, we've taken the application on its face, and it's the demolition of a non-designated building, and therefore we've placed minimal weight on that issue, rather attaching great weight to the delivery of 100% affordable housing on this site. And as you may have heard and you may wish to discuss with us, Chair, we've set that indeed in of greater weight than in this instance the delivery of any Section 106 contributions in view of the viability assessment that's been undertaken. Hope that helps, Councillor Hall, Chair.
Thank you.
Councillor Hancock.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, just picking up on a couple of points, it's referenced a few times in the report. I'll point us to 7.46, but it does recur throughout. There are references to overlooking, and particularly in 7.48, we've got, in officer's opinion, prevent any harmful overlooking. How are you defining harmful overlooking, given that we've declined extensions in the past purely because a guest bedroom window has overlooked someone else's garden? This to me isn't really appropriate on the neighbours, so I'm wanting a bit of clarification as to how you're defining this and how big a weight we need to place on it when we make a decision.
Again, Chair, as I just mentioned, the weight to be attached to any particular issue is that for the decision maker. In this instance, that's the planning committee. From an officer point of view, we've set out in the report the various distances to and out with the properties both within and outside the application site. And we've taken into account the distances that are set out between the scheme and the existing properties, but also the existing situation, particularly in respect of the Mews building. And you'll have seen earlier when Graham identified Mews in particular, there are rear-facing windows from that property already, and hence our conclusion that based on the existing situation and the potential for overlooking of neighbouring properties and the design of the existing scheme and the distances to those properties and gardens, that the impact of the scheme is acceptable, weighing all those things in the balance. Chair, the issue of overlooking is one for members, as I've said, but in the opinion of officers, the scheme will provide no greater impact on neighbours for those reasons than the existing situation, hence our conclusion on that issue.
I'd just like to clarify, Chair, if I can, because obviously bear in mind we're totally changing usage here. So any overlooking that we have currently is purely during working hours. Any overlooking that we would have from domestic residences would be 24 hours a day. So I'm wanting really a little bit more clarification on your usage of this adjective, which officers have put in, not me, of it not being harmful.
I can add a little to what I've already said, Chair, and that the existing situation is as is. There is proximity of windows to boundaries. That may be only during the day, it may be at other times. I'm not aware that there's any restriction on the times of day that the existing properties can be occupied or used. I'm not aware of anything anyway, Chair. And on the basis of that and the distances that are set out in the report, as officers, we believe that the scheme as proposed will not be any more detrimental to neighbours than the existing situation.
Thank you, Councillor Armitage.
Thank you. The 106 agreement, as I understand it, because they are affordables as such, there's no 106 agreement monies to be paid. But then it goes on, the agent, the architect, to say that these houses could be bought at a later stage on a step thing. Well, surely then it's applicable that the 106 payment should be made.
The 106 would only be delivered on the back of the planning consent, and therefore if, as you've heard Mr. Woods explain, properties or owners of those properties staircased out of a rental element of the ownership of the house, then there would be no subsequent requirement on them, those occupiers, then to pay any 106 contributions. In this instance, Chair, the 106 contributions have been asked originally by the various bodies, particularly in the case of the Education Authority, when they understood the viability assessment had been done and it had delivered an outcome that 106 contributions couldn't be achieved. The County Council as Education Authority accepted that on its face and noted that with the delivery of the 100% affordable housing, that it was unrealistic to require that, and hence their comments on it, Chair. In this instance, as officers, we placed great weight on the delivery of that 100% affordable housing, and the delivery of that is protected by the condition 6 that's recommended, and that would ensure that the houses are delivered as far as can be required in perpetuity to that purpose. Hence our conclusion that in view of the viability assessment undertaken and particular circumstances of the proposal, i.e. 100% affordable housing, that in this instance that outweighs any other requirement that there may otherwise be to Section 106 requirements, notwithstanding the fact that the scheme in its form is deemed not viable, not only by ourselves, Chair, but by independent assessors.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Foster.
Chair, Mr. Kirkham, I'm looking at, and I didn't see this early, so my apologies. At page 26, 7.17, an independent assessment undertaken on behalf of the council concludes that the scheme is shown to be unviable even before the 106 contributions are factored in. Could you tell me a little bit more about that independent assessment showing that it's unviable, please?
Again, Chair, if I can start, if I get this incorrect, and Graham, I'm sure will correct me. What the process we follow, Chair, is that where a scheme is deemed unviable, taking into account Section 106 contributions and those requested, we seek through the cooperation with the applicants, but appointed by ourselves as the council, an independent assessment of that. So we're not just taking the viability assessment of the applicants on its face without question. We get that reassessed independently by council appointed surveyors. And in this instance, that appointment and those appointed surveyors have deemed that yes, on the basis of all their knowledge, all their understanding, their experience, and the firms we use are experienced in this area, they have concluded that yes, the scheme is not viable to deliver Section 106 contributions in this case because of all the elements that go into that, and in particular, as I say, in this case, the delivery of 100% affordable housing.
Thank you for that.
Hope that helps, Councillor Foster, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? No, thank you, Councillor. And thank you, officers. I don't know if Graham wants to come in and add anything to that.
I think A's covered everything there.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we can move on to the session regarding debate. And I thank the officers for their information. This leads us to the final part of our process. But before going any further, I would just like to ask the clerk to remind us about motions.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Please bear in mind, members, that a motion must be moved and seconded before a vote is taken. If an amendment to a motion is moved and seconded, then the amendment will be voted on first. If a motion is to be moved which goes against the officer recommendation, then the member who has moved the motion must give the reasons for doing so. The reasons for moving a motion against officer recommendations should comprise the relevant planning issues and be supported by the evidence as necessary. If a motion to reject officer recommendations falls, or in other words, it is not passed, that doesn't mean that the recommendations are automatically approved. Rather, you will need to take a positive decision through a further motion in favour of the recommendations or another course of action. This will need to be approved by the committee through another vote. In terms of the timings of the motions, these should be moved and seconded after the committee has heard, read and discussed the evidence before it. The chair will indicate when this point has been reached and will then invite motions to be put. When members will be reminded of this by the clerk if they wish to propose a motion before then. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. The floor is open. Councillor Liggett, then Councillor Hall.
I was just going to agree with Councillor Elliott, actually, this so-called affordable housing. I find it very hard to get my head around, and I don't really see how it helps people on the property ladder, because when it comes to selling, they value the house again, and I know what's happening around us, the inflated valuations, but also it makes it very difficult for us when they can't give us any indication of the market value that they're going to put these properties on.
Councillor Hall.
Yeah, thank you. Just a few points. I've listened to what people have said about Section 106 money, about the building. I do like to see old buildings saved. I'm not one for wanting to see them demolished. Also, when it comes to affordable housing, again, what is affordable to one person may not be affordable to another. But we can see from the plans that the 1, 2, 3 bedroom, it's not like they're all 6-bedroom detached properties. So under the scheme of things, and bearing in mind the property has been vacant for a few years, what I'd like to suggest that we go with officers' recommendations, please.
Are there any other comments?
Councillor Foster, the Chair.
I've got Councillor Foster, then Councillor Hancock.
Thank you, Chair. When it comes to this definition, I think we've got to trust that we've been given the correct information, that these are 100% affordable houses. And it's not just for sale, it's also for rental as well. So they do. We do know they meet that definition. That's the first thing. Second one is when we look through this, and I've referred to this in other planning meetings, you know, that there's nothing on here as regards policy why this cannot be refused, this information. There's nothing on policy at all. All the way through this, we've had no policies quoted at all. I understand the feelings and I understand the concerns, but a lot of that is very subjective. We've got nothing on policy here. So nothing at all. And lastly, I've got some concerns around the ward member. Who this is, I don't know, but the ward member's comments. I've got some concern around that as well, that these have been included in here like that, talking about unscrupulous developers. I think that's an absolute nonsense, and those comments shouldn't be allowed in.
No, agree.
On that. And I noticed when it comes to the 4.3 County Councillor Woolley, Jack Woolley's name has been mentioned there. Whoever the ward member is, their name also wants to go on there next time when they make comments like this, because those comments aren't appropriate, as far as I'm concerned. If they've got objections, they should be citing, you know, why their objection and doing it correctly. You know, we've all had the training. So going back to it, I can't see anything that, I know this is not the place in the meeting where we do put any proposals forward, but I can't see anything here that any reason to oppose this. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Hancock.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, just to pick up, actually, this isn't what I was going to raise, but just pick up on Mark's point there. GS5 does bother me in terms of the overlooking. So there is a potential policy one there, depending obviously as to whether members think it's sufficient. I'll be honest, the scheme concerns me. I think, yes, ideally, I would like them to adapt the building we've already got. I think that would be preferable. Whether it's viable or not, I'm uncertain, I'm unclear. I think the key thing with regard to Section 106, which I have a huge problem with here, is the fact ultimately Section 106 is designed to mitigate the impact of a development on the surrounding area, and that's the key point, it's mitigation. And I think the problem that we have here, any development will always have an impact, even if it's just on NHS use. The fact that we've also got some 3-bedroom properties here indicates that there is going to be an impact on schooling and such like. So the fact that we're getting nothing from that is a concern. I think it would be more viable if we were to be looking at 1-bedroom affordable rented flats without necessarily a 106 contribution, because they would have less of an impact on the surrounding area. And I think Councillor Fennell made a very good point. Yes, it may fit calculations, but you're not telling me there's anywhere near enough parking spaces for that. It's like one person out of all those flats can have a visitor at any one time. It's ludicrous, isn't it? So I've got huge concerns. Again, it's not the point, but I'd be inclined to bounce it back for an alternative proposal, because to me, yes, we need the affordable housing, but I don't think this is the right proposal.
Councillor Foster.
I just comment on that. GS5, yeah, I can see where you're coming from, but it's how much weight you can put on that. And I don't believe it's enough weight when it comes to that.
There is a valid there.
And when it comes to it, we've got to give an opinion on this as it's given to us, this development as it's put in front of us. We don't say we'd rather you bring another development to us. We have to give an opinion on this one. We don't say we'd rather see this existing house used. That's not our job here. It's to look at this application as it stands.
Absolutely, but we can recommend back that it's deferred and an alternative put to us. We've done that before. It can be done.
You've got to find, sorry, Chair, through the Chair, you've got to find grounds to be able to do that. I can't see grounds here.
Okay, Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Chair. They do say that beauty is in the eye of the beholder. If someone says to me, think of a beautiful historic building, I think Ellen House would come very low on my list. I see no heritage value in it whatsoever. So I think that's a complete red herring. We know that in that area there is a need for affordable housing. And I think this is an opportunity that should be seized. If we were to demand a 106, well, the scheme would fail, no houses would be built, and therefore no people would be able to move into them. I don't find parking ludicrous, as Councillor Hancock says, and I use his word. So I can see no planning reasons why we should not do other than support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that the end of the debate? Well, I'm going to put my head above the parapet then and put the motion in. I do share a lot of your concerns, and it's quite an emotive subject, 106 monies, but I will support the officer's recommendations, and I hope there's, and Councillor Armitage has seconded it. We'll take a roll call, Nikki.
Thank you, Chair. If members could clearly state for, against or abstain. Councillor Armitage. For. Councillor Elliott. For. Councillor Foster.
For.
Councillor Fennell. For. Councillor Hall. For. Councillor Hancock.
Against.
Councillor Hartshorn.
For.
Councillor Jones. For. Councillor Liggett. For. Councillor Powell. For. Councillor Rouse. For. And Councillor Ruff.
For.
That's 11 votes for, 1 against, 0 abstentions. It's carried, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you, members. And a lot longer than I anticipated, but there we go. Thank you very much. If you wish to leave, please feel free to do so. And the next application we have is at Wessington, and that is for NED/21/01005/FL.
Apologies, I'll take this item. So thanks, Chair.
Thank you.
So we've had no late reps for this application, so I've got nothing to report on that front. The reasons for this application being before members today is that Councillor Lewis is a serving member, and in line with the council's constitution should be considered by planning committee. The proposal is for a timber framed gazebo positioned on site for use in conjunction with the winery business. Officers conclude that the proposed structure would be of an appropriate design which would be sympathetic to and not cause harm to the distinctive landscape character in this location. As a result, it is officers consider that the scheme should be supported in line with the recommendation. So I'll just go through I've only got a few slides here for you. So as it states, the reference is 21/01005/FL, construction of an open-sided timber gazebo measuring 6 meters long by 4 meters wide by 3.5 meters high at Amber Valley Wines. That's at Back Lane, Wessington. So this orange area delineates the site. So this is just to the east of Wessington, so just off Back Lane. So as you can see on site, there is an centralised access onto Back Lane. You've got a little stable building on the southern portion of the site. You've got some vines that have been planted up here. And you've got an orchard area here. So the next slide will show the position. So hopefully that still makes sense. So you've got Back Lane running along here. You've got access into the site roughly here, the vineyard up here, and an orchard here. So the blue outline just proposes where the gazebo will be on site. So that's just a bit more zoomed in version. So hopefully that's clear enough and pretty self-explanatory. So these are a few elevation plans of the timber gazebo. So it's going to be timber framed with a slate roof with a hip design. It's very open-sided. That's just a side elevation. This is a view taken from the site entrance looking east across the site. So as you can see, the land levels kind of slope down. You've got views through the vines here, and just in the background there, you can make out the orchard. So that's roughly where the gazebo will go. And that ends the presentation for that one. Nice and straightforward.
Thank you. As with no speakers, are there any questions for Graham? No, thank you. Well, in which case, is there any need for a debate?
I propose the building officer recommendation, Chair, for the debate.
Thank you. Roll call.
Thank you, Chair. The members could clearly state for, against, or abstain. Councillor Armitage.
For.
Councillor Elliott.
For.
Councillor Foster.
For.
Councillor Fennell.
For.
Councillor Hall.
For.
Councillor Hancock.
For.
Councillor Hartshorn.
For.
Councillor Jones.
For.
Councillor Liggett. Councillor Powell.
For.
Councillor Rouse. For. Councillor Ruff. For. That's 12 votes for, 0 against, 0 abstentions. It's carried, Chair.
Thank you very much. Item 7, planning appeals lodged and determined. Is there anything on that, Adrian? Any questions for Adrian on that?
Apologies, Chair. No, there's nothing on there, and members will see that we only had the one appeal determined over the past 4 weeks, Chair, and that's set out at paragraph 1.2.
Thank you. Thank you. Is that okay? Lovely. Okay. Item 8, matters of urgency. Now, I haven't any matters of urgency, but what I would like to bring to members is members' training. We've had a couple of inquiries for members' training. One is for basic refresher members' training. I'm quite in favour of this, but I'd also like input from the actual officers so we can understand from the ground up. I've listened over the year to some of the comments that have been made, and I think there's still some lack of understanding on some of us about the work and how it all starts. So I'm quite happy for that one. And I've also had one request for training regarding trees, our favourite subject. But if anyone else has got any items that they would like raised or concerned about, if you'd like to contact Mark as the members training officer or myself, I don't know if Mark's got anything to say, add?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think you've covered it well. That's the ones we've had put forward so far, the two elements. One was training on trees for planning members, so we don't get as ashes mixed up from our beaches and the rest. The other one was the basics, again, going through the process from what happens when an application, planning application comes into the council and how it reaches its end process. So that's what we had put forward. So I'd welcome any other contributions from members here as to what training they might want. This will be put forward to member development and we'll be discussing it there. It's already gone from member development to the individual political groups, but while we're here, I asked the chair to mention it to members present.
Thank you. So it's on the table if you'd like to take the offer up. Thank you very much. Councillor Powell?
I think one of the things that's been demonstrated this afternoon is that that it's sometimes difficult to know what an actual definition is from a word or a phrase. Like affordable housing, it isn't just it's something you can afford. There is a formula and a definition about what an affordable house is. So I think if we took a number of things, even as simple as that, to have a definition of what it is, so that when we are here, when somebody says affordable housing, we know what's behind it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And thank you all very much, members, and safe journey home.